Bro, this is it. Poor All Might is moments away from being Gojo'd. Stain is staining the walls of a building. Hercules has been reduced to scrap metal. And All For One is seconds away from reaching Shigaraki. This was an emotional chapter that kept urging All Might to keep fighting and to survive. But how does he come back from this? All Might is severely injured. He will never be the same. So can he really survive this? Is All For One about to reach Shigaraki and complete his master plan in the very next chapter? We need to talk about this. You guys know how this works. If you enjoy our MHA content and you want us to keep it going, leave a quick like and comment right now for that YouTube algorithm. And if you want to help us awaken the true power of our quirk here on the channel by hitting 2 million subscribers, do me a big favor and subscribe right now. Subscribing is of course completely free and every single subscription matters. Finally, this video will contain MHA manga spoilers, so please proceed with caution. You have been warned. In the previous chapter, the fight between All Might and All For One reached a new phase, and then a massive twist completely changed the game on the battlefield. After All Might used an extremely powerful laser attack to do immense damage to All For One's body, All For One became even younger as he was forced to regenerate over and over again. The villain is now barely older than a toddler, but he still has his quirk, and he still has the intelligence of an adult. All For One clearly doesn't have too much time left, but he still possesses a massive threat for All Might and the other heroes. The villain eventually breaks free of All Might's laser, and he prepares to take the hero out once and for all. At this point, All Might is already severely injured. He's barely able to stand, and so a single attack from All For One will probably kill him right now. However, that's when the big twist happens. Just as All For One is about to kill All Might, he suddenly realizes that he can't move. He's paralyzed. That's because the hero killer Stain has finally joined the fight, and he used his quirk to lick some of the blood that All For One left behind on the ruins of the battlefield. Thanks to the effects of Stain's quirk, All For One is now unable to move, and All Might and Stain have a chance to defeat him together. The newest chapter shows us the lead up to how Stain arrived on the battlefield and managed to take All For One by surprise. He had figured out what was going on due to the convo that happened between All Might, Ingenium, and Todoroki earlier, and he used his epic cyberpunk glider to follow the trail of blood and debris until he found the exact location of All Might and All For One's fight. Naturally, he saw a lot of blood on the battlefield, and at first he wasn't sure which one was the hero's blood and which one was the villain's blood. But since he met All Might in Kamino, he knew what All Might smelled like, so he was able to determine which blood was All For One's. Honestly, given the fact that Stain doesn't even look like he has a nose, his sense of smell is impressive. And so, Stain was able to use his quirk Blood Curdle to paralyze All For One. Back in the present moment, Stain is wondering if All Might has finally understood the meaning of his own existence. Stain has always deeply admired All Might, a man whom he considers to be the prime example of a true hero. And Stain wants All Might to value his own life and to struggle against death. Stain wants the hero to do these things because, like many of us, Stain feels that All Might is preparing to sacrifice his own life for the next generation. Stain is worried that All Might has already given up on life, and he's just waiting to die a noble death in order to pave the way for the new generation. All Might says that he does understand where Stain is coming from, and the two men decide to team up. They both launch an attack on All For One. However, the villain is prepared, and even though he is paralyzed, he is still able to use a combination of two quirks, Forced Activation and Phlebotomy. This allows the villain to eject all of his blood from his own body, and we see the blood splashing wildly all over the battlefield. Ever since Stain decided to leave Tartarus on his own without pledging allegiance to the villains, All For One anticipated that he might become a problem, and so he prepared a plan just for such a situation. Again, you really have to give it to All For One. He is a master planner. He doesn't foolishly underestimate his opponents, and he tries to anticipate and work around every potential problem. Not only did All For One essentially replace the blood inside his own body in order to negate the effects of Stain's quirk, he also used anti-gen modification to change his blood's composition. This means that the blood inside his body is now different from what it was before. and so Stain's attempt to use All For One's old blood to paralyze him again will be futile. Apparently, this ability to change his own genetic makeup is what helped All For One avoid capture by the authorities for generations, and of course he has no problem using it again against Stain. The villain then activates another quirk that sends a grotesque gigantic mouth flying from his back, and it bites right into Stain. In fact, it traps Stain inside its massive jaws. Stain is clearly injured by the teeth of the giant mouth, and a concerned All Might screams out Stain's name. The villain then uses that giant mouth to throw Stain violently, and the hero killer flies through a bunch of buildings before finally coming to a stop several city blocks away. As a concerned All Might looks on, the villain flies off to the place where Stain had landed in order to steal his quirk. All Might uses the last of his strength to fly towards Stain in an attempt to save him, and All For One uses the time he has before the hero arrives to use some good old-fashioned talk no jutsu on Stain. He tells Stain that he was an important figure in the growth and development of Tomura Shigaraki and the League of Villains, but his role in the story ended there. Honestly, I wish All For One wasn't right when he said this, but unfortunately, Horikoshi did kind of completely sideline Stain after that. And if we're being honest, he's never been truly relevant since then. It's really unfortunate because Stain was one of my favorite characters in the early stages of the series. And I do think that he had a lot more potential to develop and grow into an excellent dark and gritty character. But even though the villain's words kind of bothered me personally because he's not exactly wrong, Stain isn't bothered by these words. He says that his role isn't over yet because they are all part of one big process. Long ago, All Might taught Stain the true meaning of being a hero. Stain then proceeds to raise his hands as if giving a sign to All Might to win this battle and to keep living. It seems that Stain has come to realize what All Might has already realized, and what Horikoshi is really trying to emphasize in this final arc. A true hero is not any single hero at all. True heroism requires all the heroes to work together towards the same noble goal. Just like Deku and the current generation of hero students has been learning in the past few arcs. Stain knows that he is part of that process too, and he knows that the other true heroes like Deku are out there and ready to take the torch of true heroism from the older generation. A smiling All For One then proceeds to punch Stain into the building, but before the villain can turn his attention to All Might, Hercules once again shows up to help the hero. Even though All Might thought that every part of Hercules was already destroyed, I guess there were still a couple of pieces left. And these pieces also tell All Might that he has to live before they too are blasted into oblivion by one of All For One's attacks. However, thanks to these parts standing between All For One's attack and All Might, the hero survives the attack. But even though All Might is still alive, his armor is now completely destroyed. And what's worse, his right arm was seemingly blown apart by the villain's attack. As a barely conscious and brutally injured All Might lies on the ground, now completely armorless and gadgetless, he sees a vision of Nana Shimura standing over him and telling him to get up. He also sees Sir Night-Eye standing over him, and he realizes that these are just illusions that he's seeing. His own body and mind are trying desperately to muster up one last effort. They are trying desperately to motivate All Might to get up one more time. All Might has no more support items, his arm is gone, he can't even use his legs properly. But he still refuses to give up. He begins crawling with that one remaining arm, and he calls out to the villain, screaming, "I'm not dead yet, come over here." In that moment, All Might's face looks absolutely haunting. He is a bloody wreck. He looks like he could die at any moment, and yet his eyes are still sharp, and he is still smiling. He looks absolutely insane, like he's about to tell us that we live in a society. And then on the final page of the chapter, we see the UA building falling from the sky in the distance. Unfortunately, even though the UA is still some distance away, All For One is now close enough to use that sludge teleportation quirk that Johnny the Nomu possessed to teleport right to the UA. despite All Might's best efforts, it looks like the villain succeeded in the end. He made it to the site of the epic battle between Deku and Shigaraki. He reached Shigaraki, or at least he almost did, but he's not quite there yet. As All For One looks towards the falling UA building, and as All Might screams at him from below to come and fight him, this chapter comes to an end. Wow, this was another intense chapter, and there were some really good moments here, and also some disappointing ones, at least for me personally. I like the fact that All For One once again showed that he is a master planner who anticipates every possible scenario. And I really liked how All Might continues to surpass his limits and fight against all odds. All Might truly is an epic character and a legendary hero. That said, I didn't like how easily Stain was dispatched by All For One. The villain's words about Stain's role in the story ending after he was sent to Tartarus hit hard for me personally, because I always thought that sidelining Stain was a missed opportunity. And now, apparently, after all that anticipation for Stain to join the fight, he was easily defeated by All For One within the span of like a single chapter. I don't know, maybe Stain will get up and keep fighting, but as things stand right now, it looks like he was absolutely wrecked by All For One in record time. And honestly, a great character like Stain deserves better, especially if this turns out to be his final fight in the entire series. Are you guys disappointed about what happened with Stain in this chapter? Let me know down below. Okay, now about All Might. How in the world is he going to recover from this? He can't walk, he lost an arm, he lost all his armor and support items. And yet, he is still trying to challenge All For One to fight him in the hopes of distracting the villain long enough for him to remind himself out of existence before he reaches the UA. At this point, the only way All Might can succeed is if someone comes and helps him again, or if All For One's time just runs out suddenly, like right now. The only other possibility is that All Might will finally die at the hands of All For One in the very next chapter. And even though that's not impossible, it would be pretty strange for that to happen after this entire chapter went out of its way to tell All Might over and over again that he can't give up on life and that he has to live. I don't know about you guys, but now I really don't know what is going to happen next. I was convinced that All Might would die in this fight and that he would sacrifice himself for the next generation. But after the events of this chapter, we can't be sure, because everyone kept telling All Might that he has to live and that he has to keep fighting. But how? How does All Might survive being in such a terrible situation? I want to see your theories, let me know down in the comments below. What will happen next? Will All Might die or survive? Will All For One get to Shigaraki or will his time run out? How will this battle between the greatest hero and the greatest villain of the previous generation affect the battle between Deku and Shigaraki, the greatest hero and villain of this generation? I can't wait to find out. And another thing that I can't wait to find out is the truth about Deku's dad, because Horikoshi has been telling us that we're gonna learn about Deku's dad before the series ends, and yet the series is almost ended and we still don't know anything. If you want to check out some crazy theories about who Deku's dad might be, don't miss my video about Deku's dad, link on screen and in the description. If you enjoyed this MHA video and you want to see more in the future, leave a quick like and comment right now. And if you want to help us awaken this channel's quirk by hitting 2 million subscribers, do me a big favor and subscribe right now.